I'm Camille Thurman, and I am super excited about today because we have a very, very special guest who is a dear friend and a really, really close. She, I would like to say she's been a supporter of my career for a very, very long time, and I'm thrilled and excited to have her join me. Please give a warm welcome to Maxine Gordon. Hey,
Hi,
Maxine.
hi, honey. Hi, everybody. Hi, lionesses. Hi, ladies. I think there's a man. Hi,
Ah,
everybody.
it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, I told you a long time ago, whatever you need. I mean, this might not have been what I thought you would need, but if you
Ah,
need me, I'm there. I'm there because this series is great. It's so great. I watch everyone. I watch everyone. And the one with Dee Dee Bridgewater, that was so great. I know her a long time, but I learned so much from that.
yeah, that one was very special with Dee Dee and perfect
Hmm.
timing too.
Yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was perfect timing. We love you, Dee Dee, if you're watching. So, many of you probably know Maxine Gordon is a legend in the jazz community as far as being a scholar, being a manager to some of my heroes, one of them being the great Dexter Gordon. She has also helped so many musicians in the jazz community as far as with the business, but also with understanding how things work behind the scenes. Because many times as musicians, we deal with the music, but there's a whole nother side of it that deals with the business that she has been such a great mentor and just a person just with a wealth of knowledge helping and keeping many of us doing what we do. And if it's not for people like Maxine, you would not be able to hear so much great music from people like Dexter Gordon and Woody Shaw and so many others. So first, I'd like to start off with, how did you get involved with dealing with the music business and dealing with being a road manager? Because being a woman, especially during that time, that wasn't a common job you'd see a lot of women do. So how did you get into this?
Okay. How long is this show? No, no. I'll keep it brief. The story. What happened was, I started going to the clubs when I was 15. I'm from New York, like you.
Yep.
And we could go to Birdland and the Vanguard and sit in the back. So they had, luckily for us, the listening section, and we went every week. We had our little group. There were girls and boys. And on Fridays, we had our listening club, which is something, I want to suggest that everybody have, like your listening club. You can do it on Zoom
Hmm.
now, right? But we
Yeah.
used to get together at this drummer's house and listen to LPs, and you couldn't talk, which is really hard for me. And then after we listened to the LP, then we would go over who was on it, we'd go over the liner notes, and we learned. And you couldn't you couldn't have an opinion that differed with like the guys who thought they knew everything, which of course is, I grew up to find out that's how it is out here. Certain people think they know everything and then you're not allowed to have an opinion. But anyway, I was a big jazz fan and I heard Art Blakey with Lee Morgan, Bobby Timmons, Wayne Shorter, Jimmy Merritt at the Vanguard.
Woo.
And when I heard that, and this friend of mine, he remembers this. I said, whatever that is, I'm with that. I want to be around these people. And he said, well, but you never met these people. I was like, I don't care. I'm going to meet them and I want to be around them. So I grew up to know those people and to know Art Blakey, and he loved that story. So he'd say, tell him what happened when you heard me. But so I grew up, and my very close friend was Shirley Scott, the great queen of the organ.
That's
That
right.
was my good friend, and she needed some help. And she said, well, maybe we could do this together. And we had this friend, not this friend, a friend, Harold Vick, one of the great tenor players that nobody talks about. Have you heard him, Camille?
Yeah.
Yeah, Harold Vick was a bad brother. He said, that's a good idea because individually you two are not doing that well, but together, you might be able to pull it off. So which he was right, because, there, like what you said at the beginning, she had children and she had a career and she had bills and she didn't really have anybody to talk it over with, but she knew a lot about the business. She made 50 albums, for heaven's sakes, but she didn't realize that she knew, but she knew what she wanted. And that's, my number one advice to people, it's up to you what you want, not what somebody thinks you want. So then the road manager thing, Lewis Hayes says, I should thank him, because if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have been a road manager and I wouldn't have met Dexter. So I don't know if I want to thank him or be mad at him. But anyway, we were in this club called Boomers, which was on Bleecker Street. It was a great club. It was really a great club. Bob Cooper, is that his name? Cooper? Yeah. He was the owner, black bartender who had an after hours club. So we were in there, and the head of the Berlin Jazz Festival, George Gruntz, was in the club. Okay. And he said to Lou, he was like, I'm looking for somebody to run the festival from here, because I can't keep coming back and forth. I need someone to run it from here. So Lou, he says to George Gruntz, oh, Max can do it. And there are only a few living people who could call me Max, because I usually use my whole name, but Lewis Hayes is one of them, George Coleman, George Cables, they call me Max. He said, oh, she can do it. And he was like, oh, really? And I was like, well, maybe. And I had been the road manager for Gil Evans' big band, but he did like one tour, and otherwise he went from the building to the Vanguard on Mondays. I mean, it wasn't that complicated. But anyway, so George Gruntz said, okay, well, can we meet tomorrow for lunch and talk about it? He said, I was hoping to have someone who spoke German. He's German. And I said, well, I speak Spanish. It was like, no, German. So I went home, and my friend Sally's mother was German, and she had a dictionary. And we stayed up and wrote out like some phrases in German, and I practiced.
Oh, wow.
And so then the next day at noon, and he was in a fancy hotel, not the Plaza, but something, maybe the Waldorf, something. I met him for lunch, and okay, now I'm going to tell you how I got the job. So anybody listening wants to know how to get a job. I said, haben Sie ein Verlängerungskabel bitte? That was my entire German word repertoire, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
that means, do you have an extension cord, please? Because the road manager always needs an extension cord for the bass amp. So he said, you're hired. So, okay, so now I got this job. There were 50 musicians going on the plane, including Roberta Flack and her masseuse at the last minute. And, it's trial by fire, or, throw her into the pool and she can't swim. And so I had to do the payroll, the travel, the overweight. They used to carry the bass and the drums. And so then I got hired by other people because they were like, oh, she must be good. But I got good by doing it. I mean, I can't say, on that first gig, I don't think I slept, an hour, or just like being on the road, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
And, now we know, right?
Yeah.
So 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that's the job, right?
It
So,
is. Yeah, because you're constantly our eyes and ears, so that we're able to have the freedom to walk on the stage and
right.
play. because anything could happen. Your
And
flight
does.
could be canceled,
It
the
does.
train could be canceled, or
Yeah,
a venue could change, or somebody could not deliver the piano or whatnot, and you're the
right,
person on the ground running, making it happen so that we don't even have a clue that the mess is happening behind us while we play.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody, but I liked it because I could hear the music every night. You don't want to do this or have anybody help a musician who doesn't do it because they want to be around the music, not if they're doing it because they think they can make some money or it's a business, maybe you want to find somebody else because, the reward is I got to hear Dexter Gordon every night and Louis Hayes, the junior cook, and Woody, and, you know, so, you can't beat that, right?
No, you can't beat that at all. And what's beautiful, what I love about your story is that the guys, they instantly recommended you and supported you and had your back and saying, Maxine can do this, which is
Uh,
wonderful that, you had that support.
well, you have to be in the right place at the right time. And I retired in 1983. I say I retired from the music business. That's when we had a big office, and then Dex just said, "Okay, that's enough. We're done." Right. And he was 60 in 1983. But I'm still on the phone with Louis Hayes, who just made a record that you're on, that Camille is on, 2 tunes. So great. And if Louis Hayes calls me, which is on a Sunday on my home phone, there are only 3 people who ever use, I have to keep the number. There are 3 people who won't use a cell phone. That would be Louis Hayes, George Coleman, and George Cable. So, and he calls on Sundays and has ideas. And there's a song, it's called Lou's Idea. You know that tune?
Yeah.
But, not all of them are great ideas. That's what I say. But once he gets an idea, then I think it's something about being a drummer, he's going to find a way to do it. And like this last album he did with Camille, it's called Crisis, the Freddie Hubbard tune. He wanted to make it during COVID. You recorded in January in the studio. It's coming out in June. And he called me up and he was like, okay, I want to make this album. Okay. Who's there? Hi. Hi. What happened, Camille?
We're good now. It switched.
How'd that happen? Somebody went to audio.
Already entered, yeah.
I'll wait. Yeah.
No, it's good. We're good to go.
Yeah. So the album's called Crisis, and it'll be on Savant, which is Barney Fields, Joe Fields' son. It's a part of High Note. And anyway, there's something, a continuity. I wouldn't say I was in the business at all, but you can't say no to Louis Hayes. I mean, look what he's done,
Yeah.
right?
You can't say
Right.
no to him.
Mhm. But
You can't. I remember you told me a story about how you were on the road and it was Sam Jones and Cedar. Could you talk about that a little bit?
mhm. And then after I tell that story, let's tell how we met.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they know. Okay. Um, that there was an agent in the Netherlands, and he hired me to go on the road with the bands that he booked. And so the first band was Cedar Walton, Sam Jones, Billy Higgins, and Clifford Jordan. So that was
Wow.
pretty good. I was like, oh wow, that's great. I knew Billy Higgins. So I knew, oh, I know that's cool because of course that's like one of the coolest people ever born on the earth, right? I knew him since I was a teenager. So I figured, oh, well, that'll be fine. So I took the gig. We went to Europe, a 6-week tour, and we took the train everywhere because you could get a Eurail pass and it was much cheaper to travel by train in this agent didn't like to spend any money. I won't even call his name. So we were on the train and we went to the dining car. And because, your rail pass was first class and it was nice then. It's not like it was. And we were sitting there and Cedar Walton says to he's talking about me, but I'm there. You know how people would do that. And he was like, we don't need her. Who's paying her? Why is she here? Is that coming out of our money? I mean, we did this. We've been doing this for years without any help. And, we don't need her. And I was like, oh, this is a really good start to my career. And Sam Jones, they called him Holmes, he said, shut up, man. He said, we do need her. Nobody wants to be around us, especially around you. And she likes the music and she doesn't seem to mind us. And we do need her so we could think about music and not have to worry about getting the train and have you tell me what to do. I don't want you telling me what to do. And Cedar Walton shut up and he looked at Sam Jones because nobody, I mean, when Sam Jones spoke, that was it. That's like Yoda, right? And and he said, okay, Holmes. And after that, it was totally cool. I mean, he used to make jokes because I read the train book all the time in case there was a strike or change the train or we were, the train was late, which wasn't late that much. But we became really good friends, Cedar and me. And when I had my office on the first office, I think before I moved to 53rd Street, the first office, he used to come there. He'd call up, this is we don't have a cell phone, right? We didn't have a lot of stuff we have now. He'd call up and he said, I got this contract and I don't really know what it means. Can you look at it? And I was like, sure, come to the office. And he would come by himself with the contract and he would put $100 bill right on the edge of the desk. And he was like, here, so what is, what's this talking about? Really, he knew. I mean, because he was very smart. His mother was the teacher. He could read, he knew what it said, but he wanted to talk about it. So I'd make him read it with me, which he didn't like to do. I was like, okay, let's read it out loud. Oh God. And so I remember one time it was to record live in the Vanguard, Japanese TV. And it had this word two words in there that, I hate, and it was in perpetuity, which means forever beyond your life into eternity, which, I always would cross out from any contract, including, Dexter's, Columbia and Woody's, because, you're buying something forever and then your children, don't get it. So I was like, well, the money is not very good. And then they're going to own it, and they're going to show it, and then they'll put it out. And, for that money, I mean, they got video and it'll have audio and they can make money on this forever when you're dead. And he was like, okay, that's what I thought, but I have to do it because everybody got to pay their rent. And, the Vanguard didn't pay that much. So I'm going to do it. He said, but I know what I'm doing. And I feel so much better knowing that they're not taking advantage of me. I'm doing what I have to do to be a band leader and, my guys. He said, so thank you. And I was like, well, okay, but, it's not, I think you should take the money back. He was like, oh, hell no, I'm not taking the money back. No, and I'll be back. And and when I need you, you better be there. So, Cedar, he was so smart. He never needed a manager. People said, oh, he should have gotten more money for this or that. And I was like, he kept a working band till his last day. When he died like maybe a week after that gig at the Vanguard with Javon and David Williams and Billy had already died. Who do you have after Billy Higgins? Willie Jones or maybe Willie, right?
I believe so.
Anyway, till the last very end, he always worked. He always worked. That was the career he wanted. So anyway, Cedar.
While you were telling that story, two things came to mind. The first thing, the importance of reading contracts and having that education as a musician, understanding
Mhm.
you're signing off to. Could you share some insight? Because I know we have some young listeners that are either
Mhm.
interested in, becoming musicians or getting involved in the arts, or even for young artists that are just getting their feet on the ground running and starting to kind of explore the world and figure this out. Could you share some insight on that process?
Well, yeah. I mean, if somebody offers you a contract, oh dear, did I do something?
No, you're good.
Okay. I'm full screen. I see. Um, if somebody offers you a contract and they want it back the next day, you're not signing it. If somebody makes you an offer and they want the answer right away, you say, "I'll get back to you." And it became a joke when I was Dexter's manager. Um, and I broke the rule. I married him. Um, I had a rule, and then I broke it. I used to put these pieces of paper, not a card, but like a 3x5 card, right? In like all his clothes, I give him like a whole bunch of them. I said, now wherever you go, put this in your jacket pocket. And so he was like, okay, I could do that. And the card said, call my manager with the phone number, because he was somebody who the brother would say, oh man, could you do this gig? I don't have much money, but I love the music. I love you. And, but could you do it? And, he'd be hard pressed to say, I can't do it. So he had the card, call my manager. And I told him, you give him the card and then you say, I don't know my schedule. So that worked. That for him, that worked. And so what I'd say to anybody beginning, don't sign anything until you read every word. And the part, make a copy, right? The part you don't know, what it means or what it's saying, which is only going to be part of it, because the rest of it's in English. um, if you don't know, take the yellow marker and mark it, and then talk to somebody who can explain it to you. It's not give it to a lawyer and pay them by the hour, right? It's you want somebody to explain to you what the offer means, right? And you can find somebody. I mean, send Camille and her wonderful husband. We know some young lawyers that will give you a break, but you don't need to go to the lawyer until you know what you're asking him, and you maybe only need an hour or less, right? And the other thing is like to take notes on things, and you'll see they're recurring. If you take notes and it says like the terms you always want to see how long the contract is for, and the money, right? And the ownership of like any kind of tape. And Camille's very good at this, if they're going to own the rights, and you're not giving up the rights. I mean, in this day and age, you have to retain the rights to YouTube and Facebook and all that, because that's like money in the bank for you. Does
That's
that
so
answer? Yeah.
That's so true, especially today, like you were saying, because now that everything is virtual,
Right.
even the concerts that you do, or things that you stream, you have to get so specific now with your contracts and making sure that you're saying exactly what it is, or you're clear 100% with exactly what you're agreeing to do, or what you're agreeing to give creatively.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have.
But it's not as hard as people think. Or you feel, if you feel uncomfortable and you need somebody to talk to or to work with you on it, you will find someone. There are people, qualified people, but it's ultimately it's your decision. Like I always say, the Cedar Walton moment, you know, but in this, like you said, in this virtual time, the ownership of the rights, the later, what happens to it after is, you could do a performance and you have a video, you have the audio. I mean, you could be, making your own video and audio. You could be making a record, right?
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah, no, it's so important. So sometimes I get questions from young lionesses about, well, what's the difference between a manager versus a road manager? And a lot of times I ask them, like, well, how do I know I need to get a manager? When my
Mhm.
first response is, well, first you got to learn what it is that you're asking for first,
Yeah, right.
firsthand. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Hmm. Well, that I mean, I think that people know the road manager and manager are not exactly the same profession. But the thing, if young lionesses, young musicians are thinking about how do you get a manager, first you need someone that you can have a relationship with, who wants to work with you. And the minute the person tells you what to do, find someone else, because it's you have to find someone who will do what you want to do. It's your life, your career, your music. And I always say, I know it sounds simple, get a notebook, get a notebook and write down in the notebook what you want to do, make your list. I have this joke with this, my very old friend who I talk to. Everybody has somebody that 24/7, and she keeps the 24/7 clock. Um, and she said, "Oh, your lists have lists." Because I'm always making these lists, but I'm usually have to transfer them to the next week or month because I didn't quite, they grew into something else, and
That's my life.
that's very common. What you want to do. I mean, Camille's a great example of this because she's very good at talking about what she wants to do down the road. And, um, you know, I've seen people approach her with suggestions how to, like, even not dress so much, but how she should present herself in a way more commercial, well, commercial, or how she can make more money, by doing this or that. That somebody, or compare her to somebody who maybe is, more commercially, viable, or makes more money. Usually, they're white. Sorry. Which is another thing we might want to talk about, is it's a political economy. It's in my book. I have a chapter called Political Economy of Bebop. I think I call it music lessons in that chapter. But there's a race, there's something in there about white artists making more money, which is a fact. But you have to know what you want and then try to find someone to, walk the path with you. And before COVID, Camille had met somebody that I really, really like, who wants to learn the business, our girl, right? And
Yeah.
it was in school she's studying law or business?
She was studying accounting.
Accounting. That would be great. I told her, get that degree and come to work for me. That's so important. Oh my God, accounting and taxes and all
Oh,
those
man.
things. You have to pay your taxes. You can't get subsidized housing or grants or anything. You have to show your tax returns. Do it, even if you think you don't make enough money. Do it anyway. But she's, what's her name? Your friend?
Tamra.
Yeah, Tamara. I'm sorry, Tam. Is she on there? Is she with us?
She's probably watching, but
Okay, but
you did
she's
raise an
great.
important point. Oh yeah.
No, she's super smart and loves the music. But aside from that, the way she's studying, and then when she would come to all the gigs and she'd say, "What do you think? What can I
Mhm.
do?" She wasn't like, "Oh well, I know what had to be do the money," or she didn't act like she knew more than we do, which she probably is better at, accounting than all of us, right? But somebody like that who either is around or that you like spot as somebody who might be helpful.
You're so right.
Could be a relative, could be a relative.
You're so right. And many times that's the case. I remember I was talking with somebody, and they were telling me when they started out, the first manager that they had was somebody that was in their family that they trusted,
Mm-hmm,
that they knew was good with accounting, or they knew that they were good
mm-hmm,
with being organized. Because many
mm-hmm,
times what it comes down to, especially when you're starting out as a young artist, you really need somebody to help you keep organized, because the
Right.
more successful you become, the busier you get, to the point
Hmm.
where you're dealing with the music, but you need help just balancing the
Right.
emails, getting back to people, checking out the contracts, making sure they line up, making sure the conversations you had agree with the emails versus what's on paper.
Right.
A lot of
Right.
times you could find somebody that you already have in your circle that you trust, that is just skilled in that area, to be able to help you maintain, kind of like an assistant almost,
Hmm. Hmm.
be able to be your eyes and ears, so that you're working together and you're learning what you need from a manager.
Right.
So when you do get to that point, you're finally
Hmm.
able to ask for what specifically you need, because you've already done it.
Exactly. Yep. That's it. And the not be afraid to know what you want. Even though it sounds early, like in your career, what do you want? But like, when maybe you're in school, but you think, oh, I want to be like her. I always say, Dee Dee Bridgewater, I want to be you when I grow up. And there's someone else I just said that to, which I'll show you, about this new book of Daphne Brooks,
Oh, we're gonna talk about
because yeah, because there are people that have done like great things and in their own way, with their own. I mean, if you look at Dee Dee, I mean, she always accomplishes what she wants. And no matter what
that. Right.
anybody says, oh, why'd she do that? Or now she's going to do that. It's, yeah. And it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You can't, what are you going to say? You can't, I mean, and who cares what they say anyway, who's they, right? I mean,
Right.
we just did this thing, this workshop with her, and it's phenomenal, right?
Yes, it was. And
We want to be her.
that's right. And what was really beautiful to see was her family.
Yes.
They are on top of that business. Like, Talani is incredible as a manager.
Right? Yes. And I mean, she had to grow up to do that. I mean, she was a little kid, Dee Dee didn't have that, and she had other people. But when they didn't work out, because I watched that over the years, and I was like, I don't know about that guy. She could step up and say, this isn't working, you got to go. And
That's
then she
right.
was telling us about when Ray Charles said, it's your life. Don't be listening to somebody tell you what to do. I mean, she said she never forgot that. There's always somebody, I mean, we'd be lucky if it was Ray Charles, but there's always somebody who will say something to you that when they say it, you're like, oh, I'm gonna remember this. And had that with Jack Whittemore, the agent, which he was like, you're loud and you're annoying and you will keep calling back. You can do booking, because I never wanted to do booking. And, there wasn't anybody except him that I really thought was good. And he was like, okay, I'll teach you how to do it. Come over. And I went over like, oh, I annoyed the shit out of him. But he was like, you can do it. And he said, I never forgot this. He said, because it's the timbre of the voice. When you call and you talk to the people, they will know you mean it. So
That's right.
you have to pretend you know what you're talking about, because your voice is not too high or too low. It's like in that range. And I had never thought about the booking agent being able to sell on the phone because of the voice. So he was a great guy. Oh,
Wow.
he grew orchids and drank scotch. It was like, something you don't like. You don't think that somebody would do both, but
That's a
anyway.
combination.
Mhm, mhm.
So I have a question. Um, this kind of leans towards your book. Now, many of you know Maxine as being the wife of the great Dexter Gordon, and Maxine wrote an
Oh,
incredible
book.
book on my hero, Dexter Gordon. And I just wanted to say real quickly, it's amazing that we met the way we did, because I found Dexter Gordon when I was 13, and I was learning the tenor saxophone. I was playing the alto, but I was made to switch to the tenor because there were no tenor players. And Dexter Gordon was the first person that I ever transcribed his solo.
Mhm,
And the process of learning the saxophone, if it had not been for him, I probably wouldn't be playing today, because he gave me that confidence that I wanted, that I didn't know I needed. But in listening to him, I could hear that was exactly what I needed. And my whole mission at 13, 14 was trying to get as close as I can to figuring out what the heck he did and figuring out how and be 10 feet tall playing. So it's just amazing that our lives have brought us together because he was
Mhm.
the reason why I play tenor. And you wrote this incredible book on him and his life. Could you?
Tell the lionesses how we met. Well, how we met, and then what happened with Dee Dee, so they know that
Sure.
why we're the connection. Okay, because I love that story.
Well, we met through Desron Douglas, and I'm a huge Dexter fanatic. When I was 15, 16 years old, my friend Malik Washington gifted me with a whole set of Blue Note records of Dexter's music. So I was just listening to them, learning solos, scatting them, playing them on my way to school and whatnot. And years later, once I became a professional musician on the scene, I met a great bassist by the name of Desron Douglas. And he knew that I was in love with Dexter, and I was studying with Abraham Burton at the time, and they had a band together, but they were also playing with Lewis Hayes. And Desron said, "You have to meet Maxine Gordon because if you love Dexter, you got to meet his wife." And I was like, "Wait a minute, Dexter has a wife that's still here?" And he's like, "Yeah, she's Lewis's
Much
manager."
younger.
And he was like, "She's Lewis Hayes' manager." And I was like, "Okay." So he invited me to come, and he told Lewis that I played and I sing. And Lewis was like, "Okay, well, come on and sit in with the band." And I said, "All right, fine." And I sat in, and it was one of the best experiences of my life because Lewis Hayes' ride is just ridiculous. You have to be there to experience his beat.
Right.
And it's one thing to hear the records, but it's another thing to play. And I was just floating just from that experience. It's just like, wow, Lewis Hayes is just incredible. You think the records are amazing, but then when you play with them, it's like a whole nother great experience. So anyway, after that, we talked and I met Maxine through Lou. And Maxine and Des, they got together and Des was like, "Camille is a saxophonist and a vocalist. She loves Dexter. You gotta meet her." And I met Maxine right at that moment. And what ended up bringing us back together was we did a gig, I think. Actually, I did a gig with Desron and Brandy Younger honoring Ella Fitzgerald. And we ended up playing and performing honoring Ella. And after the concert, Ella, I'm sorry, my brain is all over the place. Maxine and her friend came up afterwards and were like, "Okay, we gotta talk. This won't be the last time that we're gonna, get to be together." And I ended up seeing her again at Lewis Hayes' 80th birthday party at
Mhm.
where they did the album release honoring Horace Silver's music. And Dee Dee Bridgewater was actually in the audience too. So after the concert, Lou had me come and sit in and sing. After the concert, we got together and we were talking like how we normally do after the concert. We hang. And Maxine and Dee Dee, they pulled me aside outside and were like, "Does anybody bother you?" And I said, "No, nobody bothers me." And at that time, I wrote an article for the local 802 on being a woman and my experiences and dealing and navigating with being a musician and being a woman, and also sometimes the things that come into play with gender. And they looked me both in the eye, grabbed my hand, and said, "Listen, anybody mess with you, you got two mamas right here that got your back. Anything you need, you have it. If you need advice, if you need somebody to talk to, if you need to ask questions, don't you dare sign a contract without coming to the two of us and asking us questions." And I was just like in complete shock because you have these two incredible women that are just so significant to the history of this music and that are here at this moment. And they were taking the time to talk to me and to check on me and to see if I was okay as a young artist and letting me know that they were here for me. That was just, it blew my mind that they cared that much to know what was happening and to be there for me. So that's how we met.
And then we never left her.
Yeah, they never left.
No, we're on it. But because I remember, I don't know if you told me the story or you wrote it in an article or when you did that concert downtown
Mm-hmm.
about being somewhere and a man put the phone number or his card like down.
Yeah.
So, and I said, who was it? You never told me. But because I said, because I'm going after him.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't give up his name because, okay, you're not, but I remember that because I said, don't ever let anybody get away with that. You call me if you can't handle it in the moment, because it's such a shock. You call me or Dee Dee, and they won't ever do that again. They won't ever do that again. But I mean, she didn't have to call us because she can handle it. And she knows what to do. But to these young girls, you got to have backup. You got to don't go anywhere where you're uncomfortable. Follow your own instincts and have someone you can call.
That's
And
right.
also, you might want to call the name of the person who's inappropriate, because it doesn't mean we have to go public and, do homo on them. But somebody needs to tell them, you need to grow up and know how to act otherwise. The I don't know if I can tell this story. No, I can't tell it. But we did have to go to some musicians years ago, and who weren't acting what we call appropriately with a young woman, and they apologized and straightened up. You know what I mean? I mean, sometimes then now they know there's no excuse, but then some kind of hip, what they thought was hip behavior that wasn't hip at all. But I would call them out and they'd be like, oh shit, okay, I'm sorry, you know but somebody has to speak up. You
Right.
have to have backup. That's what I tell the lionesses. Somebody, you got to be able to call somebody.
That's
And
right.
you got plenty of people to call. They're watching your back, right?
Oh, you're
You got
so
Abraham, you got Desron, you got honey.
yeah,
Mhm.
no, I was fortunate. I had a lot of great, not just only women mentors, but I had
Mhm.
a lot of great men in my life that supported me and that were
Yeah,
pushing me and rooting me on. Like Abraham, he was coaching me in uni. Every time
right.
we would go down to Bethune Studio every day and practice from like 9, 10 in the morning to 5 o'clock. And he told us, hey, if you need a space to practice that's safe and
Mhm.
that's cool, come on over anytime. And his door was always open. Him and
Right.
Pearson,
He and Nachit. Mhm.
Rashid, yeah, they were super supportive. So there are
Mhm.
people in this community that do exist that support what you're doing. You just have to seek them out.
And Abraham and Desron, when I heard Camille, I was with three friends, and we all heard her. I remember at the Schomburg, and then I told Abraham and Desron, "Oh my God, Camille, oh my God, she's so great. Oh, she plays, she sings." And they were like, "She didn't just get here. Now you think you discovered somebody. We've been playing with her for years. We told you about her." you know,
That was funny.
now they think, oh yeah, she thinks she discovered her. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm late, but it's a joke. That happens to me when I hear somebody. I think, oh my God, they're really great. And then I tell usually my friend Deirdre, and she was like, you heard him. You've been listening to him. I just have my moment. My moment.
I have a quick question. I know there's so many questions I have for you.
Uh-huh.
Um, could you talk about the difference between the dynamic of the scene today versus the scene of yesteryear and how it's changed as far and also like, as far as moving forward with the scene?
Uh-huh. Well, I'm not really on the scene now, to speak about now. It's very different. It's very different because one, I try to go. I'm a support, when we could go out,
Yeah.
I have my rule. It used to be like if they're over 80, I'm gonna go hear them if they could still play. And then they were like over 90. So it was like Roy Haynes and Randy Weston but so I go here, Frank West, go here like the older cats as whenever they worked once a week, and then try to go hear the new younger players. But what I noticed is one thing I noticed is in the conversations, like after the gig, sometimes they're talking about gigs and money, and I never heard that. In the Vanguard, I remember one time somebody came in the Vanguard and they tried to have in the kitchen, which was the dressing room, have a conversation about some booking and how much, something to do with money and Woody Shaw was there, and he was like, "Man, take that shit out of here. You come in here, you could talk about music. That has no place in here. Keep that separate." And of course, it got quiet. It was Woody and they whoever it was left, and I always remembered that, because then in Dizzy's in the dressing room, when they would have like the younger of the off Monday night or whenever they would have, or the late set, I guess it is, right? When they would have the younger players, and I just sit there and listen. It wasn't, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, those were the great old days, because of course they weren't. Or Gil Evans used to say, oh, you mean the good old days that never were. But the camaraderie and the mutual support is something that I hope is still happening, because I kind of see these groups, the self-identified, oh, that's avant-garde, oh, we like hip-hop, oh, we don't like hip-hop, okay, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen. I hope young musicians will be able to talk to each other and not, reject somebody because they have a gig with Beyonce, or think that makes them less, it makes them, it reminds me of when Danny Richmond left Mingus and he went with, who'd he go with? He went with a rock band. You remember? Do you know that story?
That sounds
And
familiar.
anyway, he, that was Mingus's drummer, the great Danny Richmond. He took a gig with, famous, for a lot of money. A lot. I mean, he said he made more in a week than he made in a year. So he took the gig, and Mingus said, well, I'd like to announce that Danny Richmond died. At least he died, according to me. He's dead to me. It's like,
Oh, wow.
when Mingus, was kind of extreme about it, but okay. But there was kind of a attitude, because when Cannonball had the hit on Mercy Mercy, and, other people had maybe a hit or something, there'd be like a jealousy or envy about money. And I hope that doesn't happen to the people, that Keon can do hip hop and be Keon, right? Or that's what I see, that, we try not to be like on these narrow paths. And I really don't like the anti-hip hop thing. I think that's a very big mistake in jazz, not that they're all great, you know what I mean? But somebody, if they like it and they want to do it, and they're musicians, we have to support them. We have to support them.
That's
And,
right.
I like hip hop. So sorry, some of you all. I know that's going to upset the old crowd, or what I call the jazz police.
But you're absolutely right, though, because I remember having talks with my mentor, Antoine Roney, and he would tell me, man,
Mhm.
back in the day, this was music. We
Yes.
weren't like, oh no, we don't talk to this dude because he
Yeah.
plays,
Right.
he plays, cool jazz. This
R&B.
dude plays
Yeah.
bebop. I don't deal with him. No, it's
Yeah.
like we all make music.
Right. Right. Antoine knows, I mean, someone they play. Right.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it was about. Can he play? Or like, terms of behavior and everything, or like Tom Harrell always told me this story about Horace Silver, how Woody uh, told Horace Silver to hire him, that he went with Horace, and he was like, Horace, I heard this trumpet player. And so somebody told Horace, I think he got some kind of issue or something. And so Horace said, can he play? I don't care. I don't care. So Charles McPherson said the same thing. What we go for is music. The rest of the stuff, there's,
Yeah.
that don't matter if you could play. It's like Junior Cook. What you said about hearing Louis Hayes live,
Mm-hmm.
that band with Junior Cook, because Junior Cook had claustrophobia.
Oh, wow.
So that's why you really can't know how great he is in the recording studio, because he didn't like to be in the recording studio. It's closed, and he didn't like Rudy Van Gelder's. It gave him, bad. That place gives me a bad vibe. But live every night with Louis Hayes and Woody and Ronnie Matthews and Stafford James, oh my Lord. I wish you could have heard Junior Cook live, because that's one of the baddest tenor players ever.
He's bad.
Bad, right?
And a lot of cats should know about him.
They should. Yeah. Some of the later records, like I think he did with the big band with Clifford Jordan, if they're live, then you can, that brother. And he was, one of a kind, like we say, one of a kind. That was one of my bodyguards.
So I know time is ticking, but I really wanted to ask you a question about this book.
Oh, yes, please.
I think if you are a jazz musician, or if you're studying to be a jazz musician in school, or even if you're out in the school of the community learning how to play this music, you need to get this book, because part of playing this music is understanding and learning the history of this music. So I want to talk to you about Alma Hightower, because
Okay.
she is an important figure that I think a lot more people should know about, especially when we're talking about Women's History Month. If it wasn't Alma Hightower, if she didn't do what she did, we definitely wouldn't have Melba Liston.
Right.
And probably a whole lineage of other musicians, including Dexter. So could you talk about that? Alma?
Yes. Well, she was the teacher in Los Angeles. She had a band. They played in the park. They played on the back of trucks. And Melba was one of her students. And if you look her up online, you'll see she had other students who became very famous musicians. But Melba was her prime student. But the thing about Melba Liston, the great trombone player, was that she also was younger than Dexter and Chico Hamilton and the other guys, in LA who went to Jefferson High School, but she was smarter and she knew more about music, because Dexter said she could write music and could tell you what you were doing wrong and teach you how to transcribe when she was like 10. You know what I mean? He was 13. No, it's scary. And I'm writing about her in my next book more. I have a chapter about her and Dexter, because one of the things that Dexter used to repeat all the time when people asked, him, about what did he practice? He said, well, when I pick up the horn, I think about Melba, because she said, there are no hard keys. You got to be able to play in all the keys. There are no hard keys. And he said, yeah, that's easy for her to say, call something in a hard key, but he would practice, what he learned from Melba. And the other thing was, and so she studied with Miss Hightower. And then I found a picture of her, which, be in my next book, Miss Hightower. She's legendary. There's a dissertation about her, about the importance of the piano teacher, but she was more than a piano teacher. She taught the horn, she played trumpet, she played all the instruments in LA, and she was funded by the WPA, which was in the 30s after the Depression. So that gave work to musicians and artists. And so, I'm writing, that's what I'm writing about in my next book, about her and about where Melba is born in Kansas City, Kansas, and how they come to Los Angeles for the better life, right? And how she studies and goes on. And when she's a teenager, She graduated from high school. She was 16. You were 16 too, weren't you?
I was 17.
Yeah, right. She graduates, and then somebody said, go downtown to the Capitol Theater. Oh, I have to remember the name of the theater, because the band leader's auditioning. They need some musicians. And so she and, the guys who were, because her mother said, if when you finish high school, you can go to work. So she's 16. So she and some of the other guys went down to audition. And of course, she got the part. And then they had her writing arrangements for the big band, for the acts and everything. So, I mean, she's phenomenal, Melba, phenomenal. But one of the things about Dexter Gordon that I liked, I mean, there are a lot of things to like about him, but they remained friends for the rest of his life. So I thought, if you meet a man whose best friend from childhood is a girl, right? And they're still friends. Like, she got a job in Jamaica, so we went to Jamaica. And they played in a hotel, and they had a jam session and hung out, and they were talking about high school. And I thought, that's a very cool guy, right? You know what I mean? And she said, he looked out for her. And he was like, really? She looked out for me, because she said, you smoking too much, you're staying up too late, you're hanging out, don't get high, They called her mama, even though she was
Yeah.
younger.
I was reading a book, and there was a part I think you put in there how she was very young, but she was playing, I think she was playing with this band, and she would end up correcting or teaching the
Yeah,
guys in her section, her trombone section, the
yeah.
part that they were messing up, and they would kind of get a little like, what's this little
Mhm.
kid telling me how to
In Dizzy's band, that's what happened in Dizzy's band, because Dizzy brought her to New York, when he had the big band. And there's a famous quote. I think she says, she's like you. She wouldn't say who said it, but she said, yeah, one of the trombone players, I think I know who it is, probably Al Gray. Anyway, said, why are you bringing the bitch from California? We got people here. Why are you bring the bitch? And she quotes in the bitch from California. She said, but later they said, well, the bitch plays better than we do. So she flipped it on them by referring her to herself the way they referred to her, right? Which is something, we have that you asked me about before and now, there's a lot of stuff, way that people spoke and the language they use. And, the when I went to graduate school to work on the book, I come from being a road manager, being, around musicians. So one of my professors said, you hardly ever have a sentence without saying fuck. He said, is that like part of your everyday vocabulary? I didn't even know, because that's the way people talk. That's the way I talk. And, I'm not trying to, speak bad, use bad language. It's just so common. So I had to like retrain the academic language, and so, but I would introduce to the students, if I fall back into my, correct, the way I really speak, let me know. And they would, it depends, sometimes you have
Yeah.
to use the different approach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, anyway, so what I mean is, like, so now if you call someone a bitch, it would be considered quite an offensive and not, politically correct. But the way Melba flip it, well, the bitch plays better than you, don't she? So, it's another time.
Yeah. Could you talk about that? Like, what was, because you've seen a lot of women musicians at that time.
Mm-hmm.
What was something that you noticed about how they carried themselves as people, but as musicians? Like, what was that one thing that they all kind of had that made them be focused and do what they do at such a high level?
That's a very good point. Because in my next book, I'm writing about 4 women. So I'm trying to listen to them and understand, how they made it. They had to work so much harder than the men, and had to be quiet about things that maybe young women don't have to be quiet about now, and sexual harassment, bad management, bad contracts, but also, like, I think about Shirley, and I sent you the liner notes too that I wrote
You did.
about the reissue of the album that she and I produced. And I remember her saying when we got the money together for her to do that one on Strategies, and I had never thought about it. She was like, I'd never been to a mixing session before, she said. So, we paid for it. We went to the record date, and then, Harold Vick helped, and he was like, okay, well, we're going to mix it. And she was like, I never been to, he was like, well, you got to come to the mix, see if the feet are right. There always was the thing that they wanted to have a bass player, even though she plays the bass with her feet, right? But on this record, she's playing the bass. And he was like, really? You never? And she said, and I never picked the cover either, or what I was wearing.
Wow.
So, it was total control of the look, the makeup, the hair. I mean, I'm going to write about that, about Shirley. If you look at her album covers with like from Prestige and Impulse, they're like, oh, she was on Impulse. 40, she never looked the same. And which is something that Sarah Vaughan said to me once it was in Holland at the North Sea Festival. And she wanted to go somewhere and they didn't want her to go. And she said, oh, I'm going, Maxine will go with me, we'll go. So it wasn't illegal, but it was just, her management didn't think she should go. So she said, no, I'm going and Maxine go with me. So I was like, it's one of those things. Sarah Vaughan says, Maxine's going with me. I was like, yeah, whatever, of course, I go with you. So I was like, so the manager said, no, you can't go hanging out in the street. People will recognize you. She said, nobody ever recognizes me if I'm not dressed for the gig.
That's right.
She said, if we come back and one person says, are you Sarah Vaughan? Then they made a bet, $100, something like that. And so I went with her and we went to these cafes and, we ate when she smoked weed. It's legal there. And nobody said anything. I think a couple guys, they kind of looked like, could that be? You know what I mean? So when that happened, I thought about what Shirley said. You know what I mean? That this total control of every aspect, but she just wanted to play. So, and pay her bills, and she had kids. I mean, she had 5 kids, Shirley Scott. So imagine. And all these women had like people in their family to support, rent to pay, but and yet, they're great musicians, and they have to practice and, have a band. And I mean, that's some hard ass work. Okay.
Yeah.
And do the cooking and cleaning too, right? And look good.
Yeah.
And get your nails done. And no, I don't know how they did it. I mean, I'm writing about them and I have to lie down. I'm like, oh my God, Velma, how did she do it? And on the road, and I had to get dressed in the bus, because of segregation. And because a guy found through Ricky Riccardi some pictures of a gig in Eunice, Louisiana, a white club that Louis Armstrong did in May 52. So I got to talk to the grandson. And I said, well, did they stay over? And he was like, no, after the gig, they got on the bus and left. I was like, well, where would they have gotten dressed? He said, well, on the bus. It was a white club, right? And when they got there, Louis Armstrong started to come around to walk in the back door. And the grandfather said, no, Mr. Armstrong, please, you're the star, come in the front. He was like, I know where I am. I'm coming in the back. So, I mean, you're going to deal with that and get up there and kill it every night?
Yeah.
No, honey.
Every night, kill it.
Every night.
Nothing
be great. Left. No, that's it. Because it could be the last, she says that. it could be your last chance. And that happened. She died on the road, So
Wow.
Velma. And I remember Walter Davis, the great piano player, he said that once. He was like, you always got to play like it's your last night. And he played in Bradley's, and then it was his last night. He died.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, this not something to be taken lightly, to play this music and to be a musician. And as Sonny Rollins said, Dexter Gordon was a musician in a musician hostile society. And that's true, isn't it?
It's true.
Art is not considered, the greatest choice, is it?
It's true. Well, I know we're running out of time. We got some questions. And
Okay.
before I get to the questions, I really wanted to ask you this question. So, the Haven Hang is designed for young women musicians or young lionesses or
Mm-hmm.
female identifying musicians to give them a chance to hear insight and get advice directly from the pros in the field. And
Mm-hmm.
one question I always love to ask my guests before we open it up is, what are some books that young ladies can read to help them on their journey in developing as artists but musicians, but also too, what's some good advice you would like to leave for them?
Okay. Okay. So I mentioned to you, can you see this book? Can you see the title?
Yes,
There's a
Liner
little,
Notes for the Revolution.
okay, this book is brand new, just came out. It's called Liner Notes for the Revolution, The Intellectual Life of Black Feminist Sound by Daphne Brooks. She's a friend of mine. She's a professor at Yale. She's totally brilliant. And it looks very big, which it is, over 500 pages, but you don't have to read it all at once. I highly recommend this book to everybody because it goes back to Mamie Smith. It goes back to like the beginning of the 20th century about women and the influence and how it relates to them as intellectuals and artists. And it's not just, oh, how bad things were, which of course they are pretty horrible, but about how they approached their lives and how they made music and why and what. Yeah, and the people she talks about are people that many of them I never heard of. I mean, she talks about a white woman who had a record company of blues women who did it because she couldn't get the records, right? And so, no, that's very good. And as far as other, if the people listening have questions about what to read or what to study, and they can go through you and then you'll forward it to me. Okay,
Absolutely.
that'd be great. That'd be good. And I have a website. There's a blog on there. It's MaxineGordon.com about my book tour, which is a 4-part. It's called Saga of the Book Tour. So that's something, if you have time, you might read. I think it's very funny because I traveled 62,000 miles and ate fried chicken almost every day. So I recovered. It was then there was COVID, and so I had to detox and when eat vegetables. But the there are things to read, and I think a lot of the books on the music business might be a little dated, but there's stuff online that I can recommend. And I mean, the classic books, they don't keep up with the copyright laws and everything, so which everybody should learn and have their own publishing company. I don't want to scare you away, but
That's some very, very, very good advice that Maxine just dropped out there. So, any young musicians listening, she's giving you a good tip. We're going to open it up for questions right now because I see we have quite a few. The first question is, I've recently become more familiar with Mrs. Gordon from her biography of Dexter. Was wondering if she could elaborate on some of the most memorable, interesting places she visited during her research. How did she navigate the sometimes muddy waters to uncover Dexter's history?
Okay, is that all one question from one person? Okay, get the book now, honey. All that's in the book. But no, but I'll answer it. I can't see who's there, but is Fiona there?
Yes, she is. She's here.
Okay, so I'll answer that question, but then Fiona needs to tell us what she's doing with women in media because it's so great. And
Definitely.
she's our sister from England. I think she's Scottish, right, honey? Anyway, not Scotch, but Scottish. Okay, to answer the question about the research where I've been, I went to Madagascar. I mean, it's so easy to answer that question. I got to go to Madagascar because Dexter's great grandfather, let me see, grandfather, great grandfather. Okay. The great grandmother is Malagasy, from Madagascar. She left Madagascar and went to France in 1820 and married Mr. Boulanger. They changed the name to Baker, and he was from Normandy, and they emigrated to Canada. I'll try to make this brief, and then entered the US territory of Wyoming. Okay. So I knew that the great grandmother was from Madagascar. That's all I knew. She's just named colored in the, or mulatto. No, the children are mulatto. Yeah, she's colored in the census. Okay, Madagascar. So I was in Paris, and I meet a man who's from Madagascar, and they have a jazz festival, and Madagascar. And I met him. There's a lovely guy, and I was like, I'm doing research on Dexter Gordon and his great grandmother is from Madagascar. Oh, that's so great! I love Dexter. You must come. I will help you with the research. You have to come to Madagascar. I will pay for you to come. We'll do a tribute to Dexter. Oh, they got great tenor players. Oh, we had this singer, and she sings like Sarah Vaughan. I mean, who knew? Did we know this? No. I was like, I'm so down. I am ready. It took 4 years because, things are not easy for him to get the money and get Air France to buy the ticket and everything. But, I stayed in touch with him. He was like, I'm working on it. People say that, but I knew he wasn't kidding. I mean, if you meet him, you just know. So 4 years later, he's like, I got the ticket, you're coming, we're doing it. And I went, and I'll never forget it. I mean, I went all over. I went to the Antananarivo. It's like the city. They had the festival. They showed around midnight in the French cultural center because it was a French colony, And I met all these musicians, and I had 2 bodyguards because somebody said, she'll go anywhere. She'll eat anywhere. You have to watch her. So they had these 2 young guys watching me, and because they told me you can't go here, can't go there, which the minute you tell me that, then I'm going there. So 2 young guys, they took me like out in the countryside. Of course, the car broke down and there was no gas and no money. So we had to wait like till he called the father. Anyway, it was a story. And we were waiting, and then he was like, oh, well, we can listen to music because they had cell phone. They never had phones at home or anything, but they had cell phone. And he had a cassette player, and we listened to Bob Marley. I never forget. And I'm in Madagascar, and we're stuck in a parking lot for like 4 hours listening to Bob Marley. I mean, I was like, see, you can't make this up. Anyway, and I did my research on Dexter and Madagascar. So that was that part of the question. And the muddy part. No, that's in the book. I mean, muddy, that's one way of putting it. Dexter wanted to leave out the 50s from his life story because he had been in jail and he was a drug user in that time. So in that decade, when he made an outline for the book, he left out the 50s. And I said, we can't leave out a whole decade. And he was like, it's my life and my book, and I'm leaving it out. But when he died and I had to finish the book, I went to his friend Hadley Calaman, who's a great tenor player, his past. And they were in Chino prison together, and he was Little Dex. Hadley was called Little Dex. Did you ever hear him, Camille? Hadley.
No.
Check him out. Hadley Calaman. He sounds just like Dexter.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
So I used to call him every Wednesday and tape it and then have it transcribed and send it to him, and his wife would print it out, and then he'd say, oh yeah, and then I remember. Anyways, basically he wrote the chapter on the 50s, and he was like, you have to tell it because people need to know what they did to us.
Yeah.
and how they tried to kill us and destroy us, and about incarceration, and about, how they went after musicians. And anyway, it's all there. So if you're trying to say, was it difficult? No, because even though he said he didn't want it in the book, he knew I'd put it in the book. I mean, he knew me. So, because he had said to me, if I don't finish the book, promise me to finish it. And so I said, okay, how hard could it be? Well, took me 10 years more. I had to go back to college to finish the book. But I mean, he knew. He knew.
Yeah.
Was that answer? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's inspiring how you made it your life's purpose and journey to go back to school, study, figure out how to get all the information to consolidate it his whole life to this. That's a lot of work.
Mhm.
A
It
lot.
was a lot of work. But I promise, that there's the other thing that I noticed, that I learned from jazz musicians, that that's a group of people that keep a promise.
Yeah.
That I don't know if they were raised right, or they just something about what it takes to be a jazz musician. And he was like, I promised him I would finish, and so I had to go to college. Because the book is not a standard jazz biography. It's just not about, he was he was born and went on the road with Lionel Hampton and made a bunch of records. It's about African American history, and about the culture of Black people. He was born in 23, but it goes before, you know,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
after, because he knew that what he represented. So
Yeah.
he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. We have another question from this is from Nan. I have recently read the book too. I'm
Oh,
curious
good.
I'm curious why there is basically no reply mail from Wolf or his company since Dexter mentioned many times in his letter, long time no message from you. Because sometimes I'm so curious about his friends or company reply to him.
So you talk about Francis Wolff and Blue Note?
I believe so. Yes.
Oh, that's funny because, oh, well, I mean, that's how it was. But, recently working with Louis Hayes on making this record for Savant, it's called the label. The guy who owns the company kept saying, "Yeah, it's Lou. It's a good thing you got Maxine, because you call me every fucking week, nagging me till I answered." Which I thought, people get busy and they don't answer, and Dexter didn't answer, and but I mean, in his period, it's all letter writing, and he was living in Europe, and so they didn't deal by phone. It took 2 weeks for the letters to get there. I noticed by the time he answered, there's always like this gap. But he liked those guys. He liked Blue Note, he said. He liked Francis Wolff, and um, yeah, he said they, never, they let him play, of course, the tunes were shorter, and he was, like to play much longer. Like Ben Webster said, yeah, I could go watch Gone with the Wind come back and he's still playing. That's a great line, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's a good one.
Mhm.
Our last question is well, okay, this is actually from Matthew York. He said, "Wonderful to hear great stories from Maxine. Thank you, Camille. Sophisticated Giant is one of the first and one of my favorite biographies. I know that Maxine has done research in African diaspora history and Africana studies. I was wondering if both you and Maxine could speak towards the importance of including African history and African music history in education and in the university's curriculum, especially for those studying jazz."
Oh, good. Who's that?
That's actually one of my students.
Really? Who's that?
That's Matthew York. He's a great saxophone player, and he's a student of mine. Thank
Oh,
you for
good.
asking that, Matt. That's an excellent
Yeah, Matt.
question.
Okay, good, good. Yes, yes. You could answer.
Well, it's like this. Jazz. the music comes from the Black experience. It comes from
Mhm.
the blues, it comes from the spirituals, it comes from the chain gangs, the work songs, the field hollers. If we exclude studying the culture that this music is embedded in, then you're hollowing out the art form for a show,
Mhm.
and you're not really
Mhm.
get the significance of the contributions of the people that create that were in this culture and how it was intertwined in creating this music. You can't separate culture and music. You just cannot. And then also the other thing too, you have to understand in studying cultures is studying how people come together, how we work together. This music is communal. When it comes to the African American experience, everything we do is communal. The language, how we talked, how we dressed, the food, the conversations within the conversations that may
Mhm.
sound one way to you, but it's a whole nother conversation within the words and the meanings of how we're saying and phrasing things. So when you're teaching this music, you really have to honor the culture by studying it. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a huge disservice ignoring that important part. It's like, if you have a great burger, but you're cutting out all the fat. Well, that's where you're getting your flavor from,
Oh,
right?
that's a great line.
And
Here
it's
you
the
go.
same thing when
I
you're
love
studying
that.
this music. If you're cutting
Mhm.
out the culture, which is like the flavor, the fat, then you're left with nothing but just the protein that kind of comes together that gives you some type of meat form, but it's not necessarily the actual burger. Well, it's the same thing with music. You got to study the culture, and it's you have to respect it. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a huge disservice by not taking the time to learn about it or to read, to talk to the people. Um,
Mhm.
it's important. Maxine, you could share on that
No,
too.
no, no. That I can't tell Matt. No, that's it. And what I thank you to, I have petitioned every jazz program with a letter saying you must include jazz in African American history as a requirement, because for just what you said, because it's not about just transcribing Charlie Parker solos, which good
That's
luck,
right.
you never can play them anyway. So sorry. But I mean, no, you can't separate it from the culture and the history. But and I didn't get the most positive responses from many of the jazz study programs that I petitioned, but we don't give up. But thank you, Matt. But is Fiona still there?
Fiona's still here.
Well, why
I'm
don't you
here.
talk? Okay, talk, Fiona.
Well, I'm aware I could probably talk to you for ages, and I thought I probably should. I was
Yay!
like, it's Maxine. I've been and Camille. Having seen the both of you here, I could it's very exciting. But it's so lovely to see you. But I tell you what, I will add, because obviously, the purpose of this. You mentioned that women in jazz media. I started this organization because of the white male dominated jazz industry, and that time and time again I would look on a publication and I wouldn't see any women, or I'd see one woman, or I would see all the writers were white men. Where are the women? They're just not out there. So I started this organization because of that domination from every angle. If there's more female writers, they write more about women. And in fact, Maxine, and I love this, when I first met you, and this is one of the key things I think that because it was a life-changing moment for me when I met you. You probably don't really know this, but I tell people this all the time, because when I first met you, you said to me, you are only letting women interview you about this book, or African American writers.
Mhm.
And that was a huge statement, a huge thing for someone to do, to say, no, I'm only letting these particular people interview me. And that really hit me, that's a problem. The fact that you felt the need to do that, and that was such a strong statement to make, it kind of saddened me in many ways that you needed to do that. But it's been that way for many years, and it's still that way now. And yeah, there was a day, and I was looking through, and I won't say the name of the magazine, but I was looking through it, and it had all the writers. There was 52 writers, and I was like, wow, that's and this is a well-established kind of jazz magazine, and it had all these writers, 52, and I was looking through, and I'm like, oh yeah, where are the women? Oh, there's one. There was 2 women out of 52 writers, and everyone was white.
Mhm.
And I was like, this can't keep happening. This cannot keep happening. So that's why I started it, to kind of help, support, change the industry. And that's from kind of getting new writers involved. So I work with kind of new young writers, women, to kind of change the way it is, because it is dominated by generally older white men as well. And it's like, we need.
So put the link to your link up, or send it to Camille so people can, across the ocean can see what you're doing.
Yeah, no,
okay?
Absolutely. I will.
Yeah,
yes,
but we love you. We love you.
Oh, and I love you so much. Honestly, I should, yes. I could talk to you for hours. It's so lovely to see you.
You will. I'll see you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Fiona.
Honestly, the pleasure is all mine.
Well, I'm just gonna, sorry. Again, I'm just gonna say thank you so much, Maxine Gordon, for joining us. I know that so many people have learned a lot from just your stories and from your experiences, and just for your insight as a person being within the business, and having connected and interacted with those jazz greats that we listen to and that we just have dreams about wanting to one day meet. Thank you for just taking your time to share with us beautiful stories.
Well, like Dee Dee and I said, anything you need, just ask. But let me ask you, is the mother of the drummer on here?
I don't see her.
Oh, okay.
I see her earlier.
Because I just, in closing, want to say it's all about who the mother was. When you meet a musician who's like totally respectful, and knows how to act, knows when to step up. I always say, tell your mother she did a good job, right? So the drummers, tell the drummer's mother she did a good job.
I'll tell her.
You could tell. You can tell.
True.
It's
so true. It's so true.
But thank you for inviting me, and like I said, whoever is listening who has questions, if they send them, we answer. Right. We're and Camille's here for you, and I'm here for her. So okay. All right, honey.
Again, thank you. And real quick, I'm gonna put up another plug in because this is important. This is I think one of the key books that you need to have in your jazz library. I'm not just saying this just because I love Maxine. I'm saying that because there's a lot of history in here that Maxine has connected the dots with, and not just talking about women, not just talking about the men in the music, but also the business, as well as the lineage and the history geographically, music wise, and era, everything that you need to understand about this music. This is one of the main books that you need to have. So I urge everybody out there, please get this book. You're going to be doing yourself a huge service and learning about the culture of this music by reading it, and it's going to even make you a better player.
Oh, I'm seeing the comments. Thank you, everybody. Okay, love this. Havens Hang. Okay, Lionesses. Okay, honey. Talk to you later.
Love you, Maxine.
Love you. See ya.
See ya. Real quick, Lionesses, next week we have a mega Haven Hang with Tia Fuller, Shami Royston, Mimi Jones in partnership with Jazz House Kids. So join us next Monday at 7 p.m. You know the link, www.camillethurmanmusic.com/The Haven Hang. You can subscribe to the newsletter and I can let you know when the next session will be. Until next time, see you soon, Lionesses. Take care. Bye.